Hey everyone, welcome back. Today we're looking at Proverbs 7 to 9. And basically what's happening here, it's a little bit of an extension of what we've seen already. But here, the idea of like the two opposing women really comes into full focus, I think. You have here foolishness represented by this sort of scandalous woman who's seeking out affairs. And you have wisdom as this righteous woman who is seeking to draw out the wise. And then you have the reader, you have the son, the main character kind of, pictured as this person walking down the street. Actually, the reason we keep just doing these episodes and the reason it's only me recently is because we were just on vacation at the beach and we were trying to get ahead a little bit before we left for vacation. So we just got back today and we spent a lot of time on the boardwalk. And kind of what's interesting to me as I'm reading through Proverbs 7 to 9 is I have this real clear image of the boardwalk. If you ever spent a lot of time at the beach, if you haven't, I'm very sorry for you. You probably won't understand this. But if you've ever been at the boardwalk, you kind of walk up and down that main strip right along the beach there, and everybody is trying to get your attention. Every storefront is trying to get your attention somehow. If it's the arcade, they have the most engaging games out front. If it's a storefront, they have the most popular products out front. There's always a few shops that are pretty sketchy. Walking up and down the boardwalk with my sons, one who's just learning to read, he can read a lot of stuff. I kind of felt like some of the narrator here in Proverbs saying, you know what, son, you don't necessarily need to read every single t-shirt as we walk down the boardwalk. Because the idea is everybody's trying to get your attention, and really not everybody should have your attention because there are plenty of shops along the boardwalk that may not be the wisest place to walk into or the best place to walk into with, you know, a little guy that's like 7-8 years old. And so I have like a real clear picture of what this looks like in my head as I'm reading through this. And so the first woman that we meet is foolishness. This is chapter 7. Basically, it's this woman that's shouting out to everybody from the rooftops, from the heights, and basically like trying to ensnare this young man who is the main character, the person being written to, and promising all these really sketchy things. Basically saying like, hey, I found you. You are wonderful. My bed has the best linens. Come and I will show you love all night. I'll show you love all day. My husband is away. He's not coming home anytime soon. Whatever we do, we'll do in secret. Nobody will ever find out. And you get the idea that foolishness just promises all kinds of things that are never really as good as they seem. They might be like temporarily satisfactory, but in the end, they're going to be really disappointing. And it's always deceptive. This woman obviously is not a good woman to be spending time with. She's shouting all these temptations to every man that walks by. So she's obviously not interested in love to this one guy. She's just kind of out there for everybody. And ultimately, it says here at the end of chapter 7, for many a victim has she laid low, and all her slain are a mighty throng. Her house is the way to Sheol, going down to the chambers of death. So not only is she misleading this person who's being written to, she has misled many, many, many people across the course of time. Ultimately, foolishness is rooted in serving the devil. Foolishness is rooted in disobeying God's covenant. That's kind of what the book of Proverbs is inviting people to do. Find wisdom in obeying God's statutes, find wisdom in following God's covenant, coming under God's covenant, or find foolishness by ignoring him outright. And so this still plays out today. We can be wise, we can follow God's word, we can live life the way that God has intended it, or we can turn our back on God and ultimately live foolish lives that always promise these temporary, fleeting pleasures and satisfactions. And ultimately, when we turn our back on God's covenant, we are led to the way of Sheol. We are led the way of eternal darkness, eternal separation from God. It's not a great thing. So option 1 is sort of this flattering prostitute of a lady that is tempting you to be foolish. Option number 2 is this wise woman who is calling out to have you obey God's law and walk in the way of wisdom. Look at what it says. This is chapter 8, verse 12, I, wisdom, dwell with prudence, and I find knowledge and discretion. The fear of the Lord is hatred of evil. Pride and arrogance and the way of evil and perverted speech I hate. I have counsel and sound wisdom. I have insight. I have strength. By me kings reign. Love those who love me, and those who seek me diligently find me. This is really interesting. This is saying when you seek out wisdom, you will find wisdom. Is it something you find easily? No, it takes a little bit of time, takes a little bit of work. It's not necessarily the easiest path or the most tempting path, but it is rewarding, and it is rewarding every time. I think about that verse that is turn to the Lord and he will turn to you. Here, the writer of Proverbs is saying the same thing about wisdom. When you seek out wisdom, you will find wisdom. Riches and honor are with me. Enduring wealth and righteousness. My fruit is better than gold, even fine gold. So here's this idea that it's not false temptation. What you're going to find when you pursue wisdom, when you live a life of wisdom, is actually going to be authentically rewarding. It's not going to be temporarily satisfactory and then frustrating and disappointing. Wisdom is long lasting, and wisdom is ultimately satisfying all the time. All who hate me love death. That's how chapter 8 ends. So if you hate wisdom, ultimately you love the way of death. Again, the primary concern here is if you're going to come under God's covenant or if you are going to repel God's covenant. And we know that those that came under God's promise and obeyed his covenant were always preserved, always lifted up, always rewarded, maybe not with money and possessions and power, but always protected by God. And here the same concept is at play. When you love wisdom, the Lord loves you. When you follow God, you become wise and you are protected by God and you are prospered by God. Then in chapter 9, I really like this concept in chapter 9, verse 8. Do not reprove a scoffer or he will hate you. Reprove a wise man and he will love you. Give instruction to a wise man and he will be still wiser. Teach a righteous man, and he will increase in learning. It's this idea of loving correction. I used to work at a boys' camp where we were working with guys who could have ended up in the juvenile detention system, guys who could have ultimately ended up in prison. We would teach them all the time, if you want to be wise, you need to seek out and love correction. I don't know why, but it is a painful thing to seek out correction, especially if you're not used to it. Like if you work in an environment where there's not like a culture of healthy feedback, or if you live in a family where there's not a culture of healthy feedback, it can be really odd to receive criticism when you don't get it very often. But when you receive criticism from somebody who you know for sure is on your team, who is trying to help you improve, who's trying to help you move ahead, who you know is wise, man, that is like better than gold, because it is helping you become better and better, and it's from a person who knows you, who understands you, and who loves you and cares about you. So I think these verses are so important, and it's something really good to keep in practice. Like you don't want to find yourself in a circle where you're just surrounded by people who tell you you're doing fantastic when you're not. I have found so many times in my own life, like, yes, it is wonderful to be complimented. It is wonderful to be like encouraged. But there's been many phases of my life where I've been blessed with some pretty wise people that can look at me and be like, hey, Ryan, I did not love how you did that. I didn't understand why you did that. You could have done this a little bit better. And usually I really appreciate those things. When it hurts the most is when it comes from somebody who's like, I don't even think you know me. I don't know if you're on my team. But when it comes from somebody who is wise and caring about me, I love to try to listen and learn from that, particularly when it's somebody that's much older than me. I can think of a couple times. I do a lot of preaching from time to time, and I can think of a couple times where somebody offered me some pretty harsh criticism on a sermon that I gave or a concept that I taught, and it was pretty awkward at first to receive the criticism, because I've had some pretty harsh feedback, and at first it was pretty tough. But the longer I had to think about it and the more I had to just kind of stew on what they had said, the more I was like, that person is correct. I need to listen to them because then I will grow and I will learn. And there's many times now where I'm preparing a sermon and I actually think about feedback that I've gotten. I can think of one lady in particular. This was years ago, but she was in my office in tears, so disappointed in how I presented the message and how I presented a message without any gospel in it. She was so frustrated and so saddened that I had not done that. And now I think about her every time I'm writing a sermon. I want to make sure I hit the gospel. It doesn't mean I hit it right every time, but I do think about her and her feedback in how I prepare and move forward. I think it's a great example of just learning from critical feedback. It was not a fun experience. It was a very difficult experience, but in the long run, it was really valuable. And so I just encourage you, have people around you that can offer you critical feedback. I think that's very important. Don't allow yourself to be in a circle where you just listen to all the people that are enjoying you and appreciating you all the time. Like it's nice to have cheerleaders, but ultimately cheerleaders don't push you ahead and move you further and make you more wise. So you need some people that can give you critical feedback. So that's basically the your part for today. We're pulling that out of Proverbs 9, verse 8 through 10. Look at who's in your circle and try to pull critical feedback out of those people. It might be on how you're parenting. It might be on your job performance. It might be on your finances. Whatever that looks like for you, I'm not sure exactly what you need, but if you can find some people that you know are wise, they have a lot more experience than you do, that would offer you critical feedback, even ask for that. Sometimes you gotta get people used to giving you critical feedback, and then be sure to tell them how much you appreciate them, and just firm up that feedback loop. I just encourage you to have that in your life, have that in practice, and just pursue wisdom by receiving correction, showing that verse 8 is true, that when a wise man is reproofed, he loves the person who is giving the reproof. I think it's great practice. It's great wisdom here from Proverbs chapter 9. So we'll be back again tomorrow. I think hopefully Jenny will be on with us again then. So we'll see you then.
Thanks so much for listening to God's Plan, Your Part. If anything stuck out to you, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to receive a Bible, you can email us at godsplanyourpart@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us through the link in our description. We love that you're on this journey with us, and we hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow.